So, yeah, like I said, today we're just kind of hanging out here in Bangkok, chatting with you guys, watch some videos. So we are going to start this with Daddy Doug. We got to fix this because we just have a black screen going on here.
This
Do we
is
have
Doug
audio?
DeMuro, and today we're going
Yeah,
to
we got
talk
audio.
about undervalued sports cars. And what I mean
So this is something that I'm always interested in because I love cars, but I hate spending money on cars. But I'm a firm believer if you buy the right car that you truly enjoy, you can drive it and you can enjoy it and you can either make money or you can at least not lose money. Doug has 10 cars that he thinks are unvalued sports cars. I want you guys to let me know in the chat. What do you think right now is your number one undervalued sports car? Mine is the C6 Corvette Z06. 7-liter, naturally aspirated V8 with a 6-speed manual, rear wheel drive, 3,000 pounds. That is my opinion for the best undervalued sports car in the market these days. What do you think? S2000? Man, if you would have said S2000 like 5 years ago, I would agree. 100% you got it right. Yeah, the LS7, 100%. C6 Z06. I have an '09 Z06, love it. Yeah, man, I'm sure, man, great cars. C5 Z06 as well. Bro, you can buy a nice, low mileage, well taken care of C5 Z06 for like 20 grand. Like, that is such a great car for 20 grand. S2000 overpriced. E-Type Jag. 89 BMW 635. Yeah, that's a cool car. Miata's always the answer. Yeah, I mean, if you buy like I think if you can pick up like, especially if you can get like a Mazda Speed Miata, like the factory turbo Mazda Speed Miata. Loving cars and living in Thailand is harsh. You can the right cars in Thailand. Maybe I'll do a video, the 10 most undervalued cars in Thailand. I think that would be a good live stream. We're gonna do a live stream about coming soon about the best undervalued cars in the Thailand market. So we'll do that. Early 2000 Boxsters. Yeah, that's a great choice. That is yes, Stagwar, great choice. MK2 Audi TTS, Golf R. That's another Jag F-Type R. That's another good one. Love those cars. The Jag F-Type R with the supercharged V8 with the pops and burbles and all that type of stuff. E46, man, prices of especially E46 M3s are out of control, dude. They are E46 M3s are definitely not undervalued. Now you can get like a sedan or like a base model coupe. It's still a great car. Oh man, that's a good one too. 2007 Camaro ZL11LE. That's a great one as well. Or just the SS1LE for like a track car. Great car. Good choices. Good choices, guys. I'm going to stick by the C6Z06 as mine. But we'll see what Daddy Doug has to say.
by this is sports cars that are awesome or excellent or fantastic or better than their current market price suggests they should be. I'm not talking about cars that I think are going to shoot up in value in the future because they're underappreciated by the modern car enthusiasts. I mean cars that aren't necessarily going to become more valuable, but just for the price you pay, it seems to be undervalued for the experience that these cars deliver. I haven't got this list ranked. I'm going to just do it alphabetically, but these are the sports cars that I think are undervalued that are better than what they cost. Let's do it.
This guy's so rich.
Today's video is sponsored by Cars and Bids, which is my online car auction website for modern enthusiast cars.
What's crazy about this is Doug DeMuro's YouTube channel is being paid for this ad placement by Doug DeMuro's auction site. It's like one hand paying the other hand.
So far, Cars and Bids has sold
Get that
almost
money, Doug.
$500
You
million
gotta pay for that
worth
Carrera
of
GT.
cars. All sorts of
Zero
special,
hate.
interesting stuff like
Absolutely
this
zero hate.
and this and this
And
and
this
this.
and this.
So, if you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car,
Another good
do it
choice.
at
Early Vipers.
carsandbids.com. This
So,
and this.
this is nobody mentioned this. This. Undervalued sports cars. Early Vipers. The V10, they sound like a tractor. They do sound like a tractor. But how cool is that car for like 35, 40 grand? It's not. The C606 is a way better car, like from a driver's perspective. But how cool are these cars for like 30, 35 grand?
So, if you're looking to buy or sell a cool enthusiast car, do it at carsandbids.com. Okay, starting my list of undervalued sports cars. Again, this isn't ranked, it's actually alphabetical. And so I'm going to start with the Aston Martin V8 Vantage and the DB9. The used V8 Vantage and
Very cool
DB9, and
cars.
particularly early models from the kind of mid to late 2000s.
I wouldn't want to deal with the
I put both of
maintenance.
these together on this list because
But
they actually
awesome cars.
cost about the same. You can kind of have your pick between
They
a
look
V8
so
Vantage or a
good.
DB9 for around the $40,000 mark. High 30s to 40 to low to mid 40s will get you into a pretty nice V8 Vantage or DB9. I gotta
And it
say,
looks like it's a
that's a
$100,000
pretty
car.
good deal when you consider what these cars are. In the case of the DB9, you get a V12, an absolutely beautiful luxury cruiser, a great sound, a gorgeous car. In the case of the Vantage, for the same money, you also get a gorgeous car, a little bit less beauty and a little bit more sporty, performance-y, tossable, kind of fun driving experience kind of thing. The Vantage is more common to find with a manual transmission. The
Man, that
DB9
car
is
with
more
a
common
manual is
automatic.
sick.
It's sort of a pick your poison. Do you want the V12 luxury Grand Tourer or the V8 kind of more sporty, tossable car? Either way, you can get them around 40 grand. And although I wouldn't normally list these vehicles as, undervalued, considering, yeah, they're cheap, but they're unreliable, the truth is that when you look on Cars and Bids, we get these submitted to us pretty commonly with 70, 80, 90,000 miles on them.
This one, look top corner here, with 71,000 miles. It's sold for $31,500. $31,500. It's a V8 Vantage with a 6-speed manual for $31,000. That's a pretty sick car for $31,000. Like, you drive that down the road and people just automatically assume it's a $100,000 car. You take that, you lower it, put some cool wheels on it, put an exhaust on it. Man, that's a sick car. Again, kind of worried about the maintenance, especially in the US with the cost of labor of shops that would work on a car like this. You would have to be concerned about that, but
They seem to be fairly reliable. And I know this firsthand because I owned an '06 V8 Vantage, which was first or second model year.
man,
And
it's such a beautiful
it was
car.
pretty good. I bought the car after it had been sitting for a while, not really being used, and it had some problems at the start, but then I drove it to 34 US states across the country and back, and it was totally fine. Very reliable, really a solid car. Quite an impressive vehicle, actually. And I gotta say, that's kind of been the experience of other people I know who have had these cars. It's actually kind of a perfect vehicle because Aston Martin's reputation for reliability has absolutely tanked their resale value, but the actual lived experience of owning these cars is a lot better than the $40,000 price tag would suggest. They're beautiful, gorgeous, incredible to look at, and not really all that expensive to buy or own. It's not going to be a Toyota, but it's also not as bad as you might think. Okay, next sports car that I think is surprisingly undervalued. How about the original Audi RS5? This is a great one. The original RS5 was sold
With
2013 to 2015-ish, and it came
If I'm not mistaken, this car has the same V8 that was in the R8 V8. So it's just mid-engine, it's front engine. But I think it's the same what is it, a 4.2 liter V8? This is a cool car as well. Like this would make a great if you wanted like a Grand Tour V8 like sports car that you could like daily drive. It's a pretty cool car.
Came with a 450 horsepower, big old naturally aspirated
Yep.
V8. You
the
can't
same
get
one
one
that
of
comes
these
in
with a
the R8.
manual transmission, but they are beautiful cars styled by Walter de Silva, an Italian who created some of the most beautiful cars, and this was kind of his ultimate beauty. The A5
like the
and
color, that
S5 are
blue.
generally attractive, but the RS5 was especially gorgeous.
Not
It was
the
also
same V8,
wonderfully
but
subtle.
the same
The styling
displacement.
was just
Oh, okay, I
beautiful.
didn't
They
know
didn't
that.
rely on all sorts
thought
of
it was the
ugly
same
things to make
V8. I
it
thought it was the
seem
exact
cooler
same
than it
V8.
was. They just went with the design, a little bigger wheels, some subtle upgrades here or there, and then that 450 horse NA V8 under the hood. And the real key is that you can pick one of these up for around $25,000 right now. And that's a pretty good deal for a low production, only made it for 3 years, rare, special car that certainly didn't continue in production in this form. You know, the next RS5 had a turbo V6. It was technically faster or whatever, but the original one with the big old V8, that's the cool one. Short production run, beautiful car, and surprisingly inexpensive. And that leads me to my very next undervalued sports car, which is the Audi TT RS, and specifically the original TT RS that was sold in the
Somebody in the
States,
comment
which was like
brought this up.
2013, 14, 15, also about
Somebody in the comment brought this car up. I think the problem with this car, as far as like resale value, is the TT suffers the same reputation as like the Miata, and it's very much seen as like a, I don't know, like a girl's car or like a hairdresser's car or something like that. But the TTRSs, man, with the 5 cylinder and the DCT or the DSG transmission or whatever, man, with bolt-ons and a tune, these things are fast, bro.
that same era. This car has a turbo 5-cylinder with 360 horsepower. That is a big number for a car the size of an Audi TT.
You can go from 360 to 500 horsepower in this car with like downpipe, exhaust, and a tune, and like E85. I know a girl who brings the TTRS to the track. It's fast. Yeah, they have a reputation of being like a girl's car.
Short production run, very rare car. They were manual transmissions, and it's an Audi RS car. You know, a lot of enthusiasts like to knock the Audi TT. Oh, it's small and it's got the soft, curvy styling. It's not an aggressive sports car. Well, this one had 360 horsepower, turbo 5-cylinder, manual transmission. This thing went, and it was really rare and really special. And these days, you can easily pick one up in the low $30,000 range. And this car will absolutely hang with BMW Z4M Coupe type vehicles. It was a very special, very desirable, very rare car, and frankly, a pretty beautiful one as well. If you get past the, oh, it's a TT stereotypes and really look at what the TT RS specifically is, it was a very special car, and I think that it's undervalued considering the experience you get, the fun, the speed, the performance, and the rarity. You're very rarely going to encounter another one on the road or at Cars and Coffee or anybody else who has one. It really is a special car. Next one on my list of undervalued sports cars, at least for the experience that you get, the E82 BMW 1 Series. So this was the original BMW 1 Series, sold from like the...
I can't believe no one brought this up. I didn't think of this one either. These 135i's, man, it's such a good... As far as modern cars go, they've just gotten so big. And these 1 Series are like the perfect size. Like they're small, nimble, decently lightweight, and you can get one of these 1 Series, the 135s, for super cheap. And once again, just like the TTRS, you do intake, downpipe, exhaust, and a tune, and they are fast. Great chassis dynamics. Like this is one of the best. Like you can buy one of these, you buy a 135i for like $10,000-$12,000. N55, oh my God, they're such a headache. Yeah. The reliability is definitely a concern with this car.
Of undervalued sports cars, at least for the experience that you get, the E82 BMW 1 Series. So this was the original BMW.
So I have a friend that has one of these 1 Series, but it's not a 135. It's not the 1 Series that has the N55 in it. It's like more of like the base model. And he tracks the hell out of it. He bought it for like $8,000, gutted it, put a roll bar in it, put super high quality coilovers and good brakes on it and sticky tires, and did like an exhaust and a tune, and that was it. And pretty much left it alone. And he beats the crap out of it. Like like at least 1 or 2 track days a month in this car. And his 128, yeah, his was a 128, not a 135. A 128 with basic bolt-ons has the same power to weight ratio as an E36 M3, except it's better chassis, interior, reliability, and they're way cheaper. Yeah, that's what he has. Yeah, he bought one for like $8,000.
From like the late 2000s up to 2015-ish, something like that.
Choice.
I think that BMW has a fantastic history of making high-performance little cars. And even though there's been a lot of complaints that over the years, BMW vehicles have grown larger and larger, which is true. The 3 Series is now the size of the old 5 Series, et cetera, et cetera. You hear those complaints. BMW still stays true to their tradition of making good little cars every so often. And so, obviously, the most famous one is the 2002 from the 1970s, but then you had the E33 series in the late 80s and early 90s. And I think in the 2000s, they kind of brought it all back with the E82 1 Series.
Man,
in the States, this was only sold as a coupe or a convertible, which really helped to drive home the point of the sportiness. In other markets, it was sold as a hatchback and with some smaller powertrains and really...
We have these. We had these here. I've thought about buying one of these as a daily driver here in Thailand. We have the 1 Series hatchbacks. It's like a 4-door like hatchback here. We have these here in Thailand. I want one of them so bad.
Really meant to be more of a practical car, but here it was all about performance and excitement, and it's a fun car. It is a really thrilling car to drive in the spirit of the original old school little tossable BMWs like the 2002 and the E33 series. You can pick up an E82, an early BMW E82 1 Series, specifically a 135, the most powerful version that they made short of the M car. You can pick up a 135 for $9,000 to $11,000. This is going to be an automatic with high miles, but you get the point that I'm making. If you spend $14,000 or $15,000, you can get a car that's been sorted with good miles, a manual transmission, and really have fun. And everybody talks about how E30 3 Series models are basically impossible to come by anymore. It's cheap. They used to be so plentiful, and then people turn them into track cars, or they crash them, or they get destroyed, or whatever, and that doesn't exist anymore. Well, I would submit that it does exist in the case of the E82.
Doug,
the 1 Series is that next level of that car, and it's getting down to that price point. When you start talking about the $9,000 to $11,000 range, you account for inflation, and that's where E30s used to be when people were so nostalgic about finding them on Craigslist for $6,000. This is the E82. Now, I want to be clear, the E82 is going to have some problems, especially the 135. That motor was known to have some issues, but that's kind of like used BMW ownership, and it certainly was the case with E30s in some ways. And it's certainly the case of other BMWs, and you just kind of go into it knowing that. So you're paying the $10,000 to $12,000 to buy the car, and you know you're going to have to do some stuff. This is a car for DIY people. It's a car for people who kind of want to tinker and maybe improve performance when something breaks or when a known failure point will break. But it's still a pretty good bargain car and lives up to kind of this special BMW ethos, and it drives really well for $13,000. It's tossable, it's fun, it's fast. I really enjoy the E82. Okay, next up on my list of
Man, Doug has got me. I'm going to Facebook Marketplace. So this is currently listed on Facebook Marketplace. 1 Series 4-door hatchback. Currently listed at 450,000 baht. So 450,000 baht is about 14,000 US dollars. Oh, look at that one. That one's sick. Look at that. Okay. I need to get off Facebook Marketplace. This is dangerous.
Undervalued performance cars. This is an obvious one. I talk about it all the time. The C5 Chevy Corvette Z06. Now, before I go any further, I want to point out this is true of basically any C5 Chevy Corvette. And it's also true of the C5 and C6 Z06, which are both total bargains. But when you do the Venn diagram here, the overlap is the C5 Corvette, a bargain, and the Z06, C5 or C6, combine them together, the C5 Z06 specifically is the bargain.
Yep.
For those who don't know, the C5 Z06 was the high-performance kind of track-focused version of the C5 Corvette, which had come out in
Such a great
'98.
car
The
for the
Z06
money.
came out a few years later, and it was a
I am so furious. Like, I want a Z06 so bad. I C5 or C6. I want one so bad. It makes me so upset I can't get one here. Like, eventually, I will probably buy a C6 Z06 in the US. Even though I hardly ever go back to the US, just so I can own a C6 Z06. And I will, like, at that point, I will actually go back, a couple times a year, just to take my C6 Z06 and go for a drive through the tail of the dragon, like twice a year.
special car. It used its kind of its own body style that wasn't really offered on the regular Corvette. It was like a true coupe, and so it has a very special look to it, with some other special upgrades like distinctive wheels and some inlets on the side that they were subtle, but if you knew, you knew. But it wasn't just that. It got an improved powertrain. It got a naturally aspirated V8, a little over 4.
Bobcat, we have tons of great roads in Thailand for Corvettes. There are so many great roads in Thailand for sports cars. It's just not in Bangkok. It's not in major cities. You just have to get out of the cities just a little bit. I mean, like, look at the screensaver on my phone. Like, that area. Like, when you go up in northern Thailand, I mean, it's just like there's no great roads. There's no great roads in New York City. But once you get outside of the cities, there's tons of great, nice, smooth roads in Thailand to drive sports cars. They're just not in Bangkok or Central Pattaya or Central Phuket.
400 horsepower, which is a big number for a car the size of the C5. And then there were all these other little subtle and sharp tweaks to improve the cornering capabilities, the handling performance of this car. And it really was.
I would love to get one of these in yellow, C5 Z06 in yellow, and do a Honda Spoon theme on it, like it's a Civic hatchback, like a Spoon Civic hatchback. That would be hilarious.
Was an excellent and surprisingly good and strong track car for steering and handling. It's not what you associate with 90s Corvettes or 80s or 70s or 60s Corvettes, but this particular car that kind of was born from the C5 of the 90s really was a fun and enjoyable car to throw around because of the upgrades that they made to it. These days, $20,000 will buy you a nice C5 Z06. You can buy ratty ones in the teens, and you can buy really nice ones for like 30, like super low mileage, well-preserved, commemorative edition. But 20 grand will buy you a decent car with like a couple of mods, maybe a minor accident, and reasonable miles, 50,000 miles. And that's a car you can really have a great time with. And the fun part is you can drive it, you can enjoy it, you can throw it around and kind of track it yourself, and then you can sell it for pretty much what you paid, because that's what they've been going for a long time. So it's an experience you can really enjoy and not really put all that much money into.
They bottomed out. I don't think
they're reliable, they're
cheaper.
Good, they're fun to drive, and I really like that car. Okay, next one. This is an obvious one, another one I've been talking about for a
because those cars have freaking leaf springs on them. A coilover conversion on one of those cars totally changes that car. Coilovers, intake, cam, long tube headers and exhaust and a tune. Like 400 wheel horsepower, coilovers, decent brakes, sticky tires, good seats. They need seats because those seats in those cars are terrible. When you get a seat where it actually holds you in place, that totally changes those cars as well.
For a long time, in various videos similar to this, the original Dodge Viper RT10. So that was the very first Viper that was sold from 92 to 95, 96. The original Viper.
Once again, like I said, I don't know what other cars he has on this list, but this is probably the coolest car on this list. It's not as good as a Corvette. It's just, in all facets, it is a way worse car than the Corvette Z06. But this car is so freaking cool. Like, for years, I've wanted one of these Dodge Vipers and put like a really nice set of wheels on it and like air ride suspension because they're not great track cars anyway. Um, like I would love to have one of these Vipers. It would piss so many people off, but I want one of these Vipers and put a set of Volt T37s on it. Put T37s on one of these Vipers and air ride. I know it would infuriate so many people, but I don't know. Like, I just want one so bad.
Vipers were sold with those famous 3-spoke wheels, no real windows, no real roof. It was a very raw automotive experience, and you can pick one up these days for maybe $35,000 to $50,000 for a nice one, which you might think sounds like a lot of money for a used Dodge, but manual transmission, naturally aspirated V10, and most importantly, a true exotic car experience. Like when I had the second gen Viper, which costs a little bit more, but when I would go and drive that thing around, people would just freak out. They would get so excited to see a Viper, especially an old Viper on the road. And it's not unlike when I drive around my like crazy exotic cars these days. I got a Lamborghini Countach. That gets more attention, but not 10 times more, considering the value is 10 times higher. These old Vipers are really special exotic cars, and even beyond the attention, they're just fun. They're big engines mounted to a chassis, and then there was some bodywork thrown on top. And they're very raw cars. They're cars where you need a garage because they leak on the inside because they don't really have a roof and windows. They kind of have temporary solutions for that stuff. They're not the most usable cars, which is why I think that values haven't really taken off. I think people look at them and say, you know, that's cool, but unless you live in Southern California or Arizona in the spring and fall, places where it's dry and warm, you're not really going to be able to use the car. And so I don't see the Viper shooting up in value, but I do see the experience being undervalued considering what it offers. It is just so cool.
How Doug was saying that he owns a Countach. Countaches are the same way. They're notorious for being not that great of cars, but people buy them and their values have gone so high just because how incredibly cool they are. And I feel the same way about the Viper.
Cool and so exciting and so much fun. Okay, next up in terms of undervalued sports cars, cars that offer more than their price tag would suggest. Next one, maybe this is too easy or obvious, but the ND Mazda Miata. I've never been a massive Miata guy. There's some people who are really obsessed with them. I'm more of a generalist. I like the NA and the NB and the NC just fine, but for me, the ND, which is the current, most recent Mazda Miata, came out 10 years ago now, back in 2015.
RF,
that is just the most exciting and enjoyable and wondrous car. I love how the ND Miata looks. I love how...
I like this with the what do you call this roof? Brain fart moment. Targa, with the Targa top. It's a very cool car. I'm 6'4", so I have owned a Miata. I owned an NB Miata. I bought it at auction at one point for like a good deal, and I was gonna immediately sell it, but I ended up I liked it so much I kept it for like 3 months, but then I sold it because I could fit in it, but I looked like a complete idiot getting in and out of the car. I looked ridiculous. But once I was in it, I was okay.
How it drives, I love how it feels, I love how it handles, and I love that they were able to bring back the spirit of like the original little kind of lightweight Miata while still including modern features that you would expect and wrapping it in this absolutely gorgeous package. It is not the fastest car in the world, and in order to make it a really excellent, great experience, you kind of have to get a later one. They got more power. They added a folding hardtop, which I think makes it look better and more usable. But then you start to lose the value proposition. The early ND Miatas, which came out for the 16 model year, you can get a cheap one for around $15,000, and around 20 will get you a really decent one with a manual transmission and low mileage and a lot of fun. And I don't want to say that's a lot of car for the money because it's not in terms of horsepower and performance, but it is a really nice experience for that price point. And again, a very slow depreciation curve. They did not make a ton of ND Miatas. You know, interest in that segment has not been as strong as it was when the Miata first came out 30 years ago. And so it's been a little bit rarer to find, especially a manual, well-equipped, not over-modified, not crashed. And for 20 grand, that gets you a nice one. You can probably own that 5 or 6 years and sell it for not too much less than that and really get a nice experience out of it. Now, again, you're not going to have the experience of throwing it around and really flooring it and getting great power, out accelerating everybody from a stoplight, but you will have a really great steering and handling experience in a really nice looking car. And you can look at yourself and say, you know, for 20 grand, this gives me a lot of the thrills that people get in exotic cars that cost way more, just sort of without the ego component, right? Like nobody's ever going to look at an ND and say, whoa, man, that's a cool car. But you can have the same experience. And frankly, I think that's just as enjoyable for a lot of people. It's really a nice car. It's really a lot of fun
Joseph
to
Scott.
own, to drive, to exist with.
I literally watched a video like 2 or 3 days ago where somebody had one of these ND Miatas and they had an LS3 in it. And the guy was doing like a track day in it. And yeah, that's that's a badass car.
Really love the ND. Okay, next up on my list of undervalued sports cars for the experience they provide. This one is obvious and it doesn't get discussed enough, but the Nissan 350Z, the one that came out back in 03, is a really, really undervalued car considering all that it offers. The 03Z came out with about 300 horsepower. Initially, it was just shy, and later it was boosted to right about 300 horsepower. They are easy to find. There's a lot of them around. They're easy to find manual transmissions. A lot of them.
This is me. So I bought this car, 350Z, with 30,000 miles on it. Completely bone stock. Owned by a woman, bought at a dealership in southern Georgia. All the maintenance was done at that dealership in southern Georgia, and then she traded it in at that same dealership in southern Georgia. I drove down there, bought the car, bone stock, turned it into that. I did my first track day in this car when it was bone stock. And I did 50 track days in that car over the next 5 years. 50 track days. At the tail of the dragon. Absolutely loved this car. Absolutely loved it. That was the interior. Gutted. Kind of just gutted cage, Sparco seats. Some of my best times of my life driving a car was behind the wheel of this car. So I definitely agree with Doug. So the thing about the Z, the VQ engine, despite its trumpet memes, is a great, reliable engine. I bought that car with 30,000 miles on it, sold it with 90,000 miles on it. All of those miles were track miles or driving in the mountains. Pretty much all of them. Like all of them were track miles or mountain miles. Beat the crap out of that car. I did have to replace the transmission because of a third gear synchro issue. I was able to buy a used, updated CD009 transmission, and it was like $900, like a low mileage, like used transmission, $900. I had to replace an axle and wheel bearings. Besides that, oil changes, brake pads, rotors, tires, transmission fluid, track day, beat the crap out of it, rinse and repeat over and over and over for 5 years. I did 50 track days in that car. I went from my first track day in the car bone stock, never been on track in my life, having no idea how to drive, up to advanced class, chasing down Porsche GT3s in that car. And so this is from Atlanta Motor Speedway, the NASCAR track. So they would do track days at Atlanta Motor Speedway at the NASCAR track. And what they would do is they would allow you to run up on the bank of the NASCAR track, and then they would route you through the infield so you could drive the car through the infield and then dump you back out on the NASCAR track. And on this NASCAR track, in my 350Z, fifth gear, my red line light would be blinking. And I would hit red line in fifth gear on the track, on the NASCAR track. It was sick, bro. So this is going through the infield at the Atlanta Motor Speedway. And then right here is where it dumps onto the right there is. So I kept having a problem because you can see this is an old video, guys. This is 8 years old. This is like a GoPro like 2 or something. You can see where the infield is paved, a different surface. So when you would go from the infield to the NASCAR bank, the surface would change. And you'd be turning full throttle and you would go a complete surface change. And the car would just like literally just come out from underneath you. And that would happen. So this is the NASCAR bank. I mean, the car made 250 wheel horsepower, but it wasn't super fast, but that's top of 5th gear. And then in part of the NASCAR bank, they would route you through this little section here. So in this video, I'm showing you because I spun out. I spun out in this video. Going on to the NASCAR bank. So this is back on the NASCAR bank. It's so weird, you're like this. You feel like you're gonna tip over. One thing that would change this car is the flywheel. Also, right here, this part of the infield, as soon as you would snatch the 3rd to 4th gear pull, this hill, you would literally launch that hill. For a millisecond, all 4 wheels would come off the ground. And you can actually hear the revs of the engine. As soon as I snatch the 3rd to 4th gear pull, you hear the wheels come off the ground and the car just like rev. Listen closely. You hear that? Hilarious. I think this is where I spin out. Oopsie. Sent it a little bit too hard. Anyway, random, I know, but I'm a big Z enthusiast. Yeah, it does sound like a baby GTR. Yeah, I kind of figured out the way to get that car to actually sound pretty good, at least for Z. But one thing that I was saying is one thing that really changes these cars so much is they come factory with a dual mass flywheel that's extremely heavy to cut down on drivetrain noise. But if you put a single mass lightweight aluminum flywheel in these cars, it frees up that VQ engine so much, and it makes it so rev happy, and it's actually a really great naturally aspirated fun torquey V6. It's not going to make a ton of power, You know, you're going to get 250 to 270 wheel horsepower out of it, but it's really, really reliable.
Were made. It has a very reliable powertrain that is very easy to own, to operate, to tune, to modify, and to find parts for that VQ V6 engine. And you can find one pretty easily for around $10,000. And that is just a total bargain, especially when you consider that the previous model, the Z32, which was sold from like the early 90s, 96, 97, nice versions of that car are big money, $40,000, $50,000 for really well-kept nice ones. The 350Z has never really earned that classic car status where values start to rise and it starts to appreciate. And so it never really got expensive or valuable. And they're still, even nice ones to this day, are not really that much more than around $10,000 for a fun, tossable, powerful. This is actually a car that even by today's standards still feels fast and exciting and powerful. Reliable sports car. And I think it looks cool, and I think it still kind of turns heads. And I think someday you will see some of that value appreciation and excitement for these cars, especially nice ones kept in good shape. But right now, enjoy the bargain while you can. It really is a surprisingly good deal. And finally, my last undervalued sports car that delivers more than it should for the price. This is an obvious one. Been talking about this for years. The 996 Porsche 911. The Porsche 911 that was sold from 1999 to 2005, give or take. These are really fun cars. It's your ability to get into a Porsche 911 without spending $80, $90, $100,000 like so many older 911s now cost. Those old 911s are kind of gold.
So he said this is his last one, but my choice when it comes to the Porsche 911 is the 997.1s right after the 996. The 997.1 Carrera S's. Dude, you can buy those for a great deal. They don't have the runny egg headlights. You can get a manual transmission, rear-wheel drive 997.1 Carrera S for a really good deal now. I mean, you can get those for in the 40s, and that's a good car. That's a really good, like, exotic car for the money, my opinion. But I hate the front end of the 996s. It's very tough for me to get
gone from a lot of enthusiasts who want the Porsche experience. And so the question is, well, how can I get into a 911? You know, every enthusiast kind of asks themselves that question at one point. And the answer is a 996, which is still a very affordable car. Early automatic transmission 996 911s are in the low teens, $13,000, $14,000, $15,000.
Bro, if you buy an automatic 996 911, just stop. Like, don't. If you buy this car, this generation 911, listen, the new PDKs are fantastic, and I get it. I totally get it. I still would rather have a manual, but I totally understand why people buy a PDK. It is actually better. It's superior. But if you buy this and an automatic, bro, get out of my face. No.
But even if you want a manual, around 20 buys you a cheap manual 996 911, and $30,000 buys you a really nice one, like a good, it'll be a two-wheel drive, narrow body car, move some miles, but like no bad Carfax, later model, not modified, like a nice, good 996, $30,000 will buy that for you. And that's a pretty good number to get into a 911 when you look at the fact that earlier cars, even regular ones, are in the $60,000, $70,000 range. That's getting out of reach for a lot of enthusiasts. If you've ever wanted to scratch that 911 itch, yeah, it's just the 996, but it still drives fantastically. It's still a wonderful car to own and operate and use. You know, the 911 that came before the 996 was the 993, which everybody is so obsessed with, such a special car, and it really is. But the 996 was the successor, the later version, for a reason. It was more powerful. It was just as enjoyable to drive. It's really a very, very exciting car. It just doesn't look as good, it wasn't as reliable, and they made far more. And so production numbers have made it less rare and a little bit less special in terms of buying it. But I think a really nice 996, and especially one that's been well sorted with the IMS issue taken care of, is a really good bargain even still today. And I think that's especially true when you look at what's happened to older 911 values and you start to wonder if that market is going to completely slip away from you. If you want to make a purchase and just take a bite out of the 911 world, having a 996 is a special way to do it, regardless of what Porsche purists tell you. They'll complain about the water cooled, the interior quality body, the look of the headlights. It's all stupid when you're behind the wheel. It is a fun, enjoyable, tossable, fast, exciting car to drive with great driver inputs, pedals, steering, brake. It's just a great car. And they had a little bit of a moment right after COVID. The prices started to rise, and I started to think, hey, this is it. The 996 is finally going to start to become a really valuable car. The enthusiasts, the collectors are starting to latch on. And then it kind of dropped off. The balloon deflated, and 996 values came right back down, and they're still affordable. And I'm not sure how much longer that's going to last. As more of these get modified, as more engines blow up, a lot of automatics out there, a lot of people doing safari builds, like it's going to become harder and harder to find a nice 996 in the future. And so if you want to do it at some point soon, get into a 911, this is your chance to do it without spending crazy money. So those are my undervalued sports cars. Again, I don't necessarily think all of these are going to shoot up in value over the years, but I do think all of them give more of an experience than you would expect considering what they cost. All of these cars are special, fun, and exciting, and surprisingly affordable, considering how enjoyable they are at various different price points. I really like all of the cars on this list, some more maintenance intensive than others, but all of them are a really good bargain for what they deliver to the car enthusiast.
Out of all these cars, these are the choices you have. V8 Vantage, the Audi RS5, the Audi TT RS, the 1 Series BMW, the C5 Z06, the Dodge Viper, first generation Dodge Viper RT10, ND Mazda Miata, 350Z, and 996 911. Which one are you buying? No Z28 Camaro. I really like the 5th generation Z28 with the LS7 in it, the Vantage with the stroked LS3 in it, Viper, Corvette. I love Nissan, so I'd go with the 350Z. Yeah, for me, I think I'm going to go Corvette Z06, the C5 Z06. I think the C5 Z06 offers the most value for the money that you spend, if that makes sense. As far as it being cool, driving characteristics, performance, for the money that you spend, I personally believe that the C5 Z06 is the most undervalued car on this list, in my opinion. Overall, I think it was a great list.